Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast where I give you my unfiltered take straight off the cuff. And today I'm going to be talking about the new record from Black Matter Device. Black Matter Device are a mathcore band and the newest album's called Autonomous Weapons. And just to give you a little background, I'm a huge fan of the genre. I love bands like, Botch, Dillinger Escape Plan, Converge, Employed to Serve, Pupil Slicer, all that kind of like ultra frantic, really heavy, rock based music, I guess. For those who don't know, the genre typically features a ton of like incredibly fast, frantic, dizzying time signatures and playing, lots of kind of incredibly, I guess you could say, like angular riffs. Just all the guitar noises are like often very sharp and pop out the mix. There's sometimes like jazz influences in the mix, like with Dillinger Escape Plan, especially on their earlier material. We have loads of I almost feel like you'd get kind of like melodies and that kind of thing you'd almost hear in jazz, but applied to a heavier and more distorted context. And again, in incredibly like mathy and kind of technical music a lot of the time. So Black Matter Device, really new band. I think their debut came out in like 2018, so it's been a little while between these two records. And I never listened to the first one for the record, because for me personally, a lot of the newer mathcore stuff I've not enjoyed quite as much. Bands like Frontiera haven't quite caught my attention as much as some of the older stuff like Calistour Boys, stuff like that. I know other people really enjoy this stuff. It's just not massively to my tastes. But that's why I wanted to talk about this new Black Matter Device record, because this is a really, really frantic and really like well realized version of this kind of newer style of mathcore, I think. And one of the things I can really appreciate about this record right off the bat is just how much it pulls from so many other influences within this realm of just like incredibly dizzying heavy music, I guess. Across the record, I'm catching bits of Dillinger, bits of The Locust. One tune just straight out reminds me of Every Time I Die. There's like bits of Sixth in here as well. Actually, I would even reference a band like Frontiera slightly in here, or Car Bomb as well, just in how heavy some of the guitar notes are, which isn't something that I traditionally like associate with this genre. Generally, it's more like noisy and frantic rather than just straight heavy, but this works it in such a way that it keeps the best elements of both. Some of those chugged riffs are like really nasty, but like it's still incredibly dizzying and incredibly chaotic. And first thing I'll say is a lot of that I will attribute to the drummer, because my god, I cannot. It almost feels like disrespectful to say like the fills he pulls off are incredible, because like almost 50% of what he's playing is what I would traditionally call a drum fill, but it's just like the part for that section. It's insane how like fast and accurate and frantic his playing is. It's really impressive. And the crazy part is it doesn't feel like overly mechanical or anything like that. It feels very like in the moment and kind of like, I don't know, organic, I guess you could say, which is almost like a difference from a lot of the more original stuff. Like if you listen to Chris Penny's playing on the first Dillinger record, I mean, he's incredible on that record, and Calculating Infinity is, one of my all-time favorite records. But I think a lot of what Dillinger were doing there was definitely like intentionally cold and kind of almost mechanical to an extent. And I think that stuff does have its place, but I'm not a fan of it so much in the newer, more heavy stuff, like on Frontiera, which again are a band that I really respect, and I've seen them live, I think they're really good, but musically it's just a little bit much for me a lot of the time. Like I find the record doesn't or a lot of their records don't have enough dynamicism in the playing, and just how like intense and tight the drums are is a large part of that. But for whatever reason, I think this record has just as much intensity, but it really works for me. It just sounds more organic. But yeah, just going from the start, this record isn't particularly long. It's only like 26 minutes, what it says on my music player, so it's really not a long record. And the first half is also most of the songs are like a minute long, so like really quick, really frantic tunes, but they have so many ideas that it doesn't really get boring as such. So just to go through it, I guess, like the first track kind of opens with some of the more new age, really like heavy chugged guitar riffs, and when I heard that, I thought like I was going to be a little bit maybe underwhelmed with this record, but across the course of the first tune, you get loads of different stylings. Like there's a bunch of sasscore on this, which for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's really hard to describe it, but you'll know it when you hear it for sure. But it's just a very odd sounding style of like very distorted mathcore, I guess. Bands like The Locust or Early Daughters are like some great examples of that. And this track in particular does remind me a lot of Early Daughters. The second tune, that sliding effect riff, is also very Daughters, and the back end is very Carbon on this one. Both these tunes ultra frantic, very like edge of your seat playing, super like blood pumping if you're into this type of thing, and if these riffs catch your eye, The next track, Meat Computers, is a very, very short, very frantic track again. Sesame Sweet Streeper is kind of like the first big highlight for me because it breaks away from the just how frantic and frenetic the first three tracks are. But this one has like a Sixth-esque, really melodic section that just goes into this absolutely nasty chugged riff. The whole track just has a ton of forward momentum as well. Every part flows into the next seamlessly. It's all really, really well done. Pretty masterfully executed too. The next track, Sewer Slide Pack, is like pretty sasscore. It reminds me a lot of Heavy Heavy Low. There's even maybe a touch of The Locust on this one. I love the groove metal riff towards the end. That reminds me of like some early Employed to Serve, which I can hugely respect. The next track, Dungeons and Drug Dealers. Some of these song names are great, by the way. It's exactly what you'd expect from the genre, but I had a little chuckle at a good number of these. But yeah, this track just really reminds me of like a very fucked up interpretation of Something Every Time I Die would do. It's like that style of party tune almost, with some of those like southern tinged breakdowns, and the main riff has like these guitar licks in them you'd expect from a band like Every Time I Die. This one's also like a big highlight. Y'all Wanna Play This is probably the first moment where I was like, okay, this is where the record could maybe start to like wear off a little bit, because this track is another one of those like really frantic tracks. It's got this great stabbing guitar riff towards the end that I really liked, but it definitely gets into the definitely gets into the part of the record where I feel like maybe there's a little bit too much similarity between some of these tracks. And just for the record, even this criticism of like some of the tracks kind of like feel like they're playing the same role a little bit. Like, even though that is the case, all of it is executed very well. So I'm sure other people that are more into mathcore than me will, still really enjoy all of this stuff. And this is on a first listen, so maybe it takes time to differentiate them a little bit more. Hear the unique qualities kind of like between the different tracks. But on a first listen, a lot of this stuff is going to kind of just like blast by and not leave a huge impression. It's just kind of like, I don't know, it comes with a genre, really. But this is definitely the point in the record where everything was starting to blur together a bit for me. However, fortunately enough, there's also the point in the record where the track lengths start to get a bit longer. And I think that is kind of a bit of a double-edged sword for this record, and I think this is what the record will live and die on, because like right now I can say this is a really, really enjoyable mathcore record, but the longer tunes sometimes feel a little bit just like the shorter tunes but stretched out to like 2 minutes. So it's still like incredibly frantic, loads of different parts being thrown at you, but it doesn't really have as much intention as with the short tracks, unfortunately, is what I found. So like God Knows and He Ain't Tellin' and Concrete Nosedive kind of just blew by without me paying a whole ton of attention to them. The exceptions to this would be Coffin Flops. I really enjoyed. It was like it had this really cool sludge metal back half that I thought was very well executed, and Snuff Film Actors Guild as well opens up with, again, some more sludgy kind of soured guitar riffs, but I love the shots of feedback over the drum break. This feels like it had a lot of the frantic qualities of the shorter tracks, but at the same time the structure felt like it had more purpose and more forward momentum than some of the other longer tracks, which I can really, really appreciate. Unfortunately, Gender Mountain didn't quite stick the landing for me, though. I felt like this was another one of those just very frantic tracks that kind of went on maybe a bit longer than it should have, with a kind of really long portion of feedback at the end before a final very short, like, breakdowny section, I suppose you could say. But despite the fact that I'm being a little bit negative on the back end of this record, like I said, I do think this is one of those records that I could see myself listening to for a while. I do think there's a ton to appreciate here. It really does, like I said, feel like there's a real appreciation for a lot of different types of heavy sounds. So if you're into, like, heavy sludge metal records, if you enjoy bits of metalcore here and there, if you are aware of bands like Daughters and the kind of experimentation they pull off, or even like The Locust and the shorter, more like grindy stuff they do, then there's a lot here that you'll appreciate. There's lots of different shades to the heaviness here, but I guess just how how much of an impact I guess the longer tracks leave on me is kind of what this record will live and die on in terms of like the really, really long impact. But regardless, this is a very, very enjoyable listen. If you're into this type of music, you should definitely check it out. One thing I can really appreciate as well is the production is very gritty and very organic. It doesn't feel in any way overly mechanical, which is a which is a problem I have with a ton of records in this style. But it's just not a problem here, and it really adds to the dirty, just nasty feeling of this record. But despite all that, you can still hear the bass across the entire record, and there's tons of moments where it'll really pop out in what sounds like a slap bass section. It just adds a ton of personality to the whole record. So, from a production perspective, I think this is a great take on this type of music. Like I said, ton of variety in terms of the heavy sounds that are on display here. So yeah, if that sounds like your bag, definitely give this a shot. I'm having a lot of fun with this one. I'll probably listen to it a lot more over the course of the year. And then, yeah, we'll just see how it goes. I might even check out their previous record. But I think from what I can gather, this is definitely the one that people seem to think is better. So yeah, awesome record. Definitely go check it out if you're into this type of like ultra frantic heavy music. I think there's a lot to appreciate here. But yeah, cheers for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and have a good day. Peace out, everybody.